of the most eligible bachelors in the territory, and one of the most principled men she had ever met. But now she wondered if she would ever see him again, and if she did, whether things could ever be the same between them now that she knew his secret. Clara spent 3 weeks at Thomas's ranch, but she couldn't stop thinking about Jack. Every day, she found herself looking toward the mountains where his cabin lay hidden among the pine trees. She helped Thomas with the household chores and tried to make plans for claiming her father's land. But her heart wasn't really in it. Thomas noticed her distraction and finally brought up the subject one evening as they sat on his porch watching the sunset. "You're thinking about him, aren't you?" he said gently. Clara didn't need to ask who he meant. "I can't help it, Thomas. I keep wondering why he didn't tell me the truth about who he was." "Maybe he was trying to protect you," Thomas suggested. "Or maybe he was trying to protect himself. When you have that kind of wealth, you never know if people care about you or just your money." Clara had thought about that possibility, but it still hurt. During those days at Jack's cabin, she had felt closer to him than anyone she had ever known. To discover that he had been keeping such an enormous secret made her question everything they had shared. "Do you think he cares about me at all?" she asked quietly. Thomas smiled. "Clara, I saw the way that man looked at you when we came to get you. He cares about you more than he probably wants to admit." 2 days later, everything changed. A rider came galloping up to Thomas's ranch with urgent news. Jack's father, William Harrison, had finally tracked down his missing son. He had arrived at Jack's cabin with a group of lawyers and railroad men, demanding that Jack return to Denver and take his rightful place in the family business. "They say old man Harrison is furious," the rider reported. "He's threatening to cut Jack off completely if he doesn't come back. No inheritance, no family name, nothing." Clara felt her heart clench with worry. She knew how much Jack valued his independence and his principles. But she also understood what it meant to lose family. She had felt that pain when her father died. "I have to go to him," she told Thomas. Her brother looked concerned. "Clara, this is family business. It's not your place to interfere." "Maybe not," Clara said firmly. "But Jack saved my life. If there's any way I can help him now, I have to try." Thomas studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, but I'm coming with you." They rode hard toward Jack's ranch, arriving just as the sun was setting. From a distance, they could see several expensive carriages parked near the cabin, along with a group of well-dressed men standing near the porch. Clara recognized Jack's tall figure among them, but even from far away she could tell the conversation was not going well. As they got closer, Clara could hear raised voices. An older man with silver hair and an expensive suit was doing most of the talking, his tone angry and demanding. "You've had your little adventure, Jack," the man was saying. "Now it's time to stop this nonsense and come home. The railroad needs you, and the family needs you." "The family needed me 3 years ago when I tried to talk sense into you about how we treat people," Jack replied, his voice steady but firm. "You weren't interested in listening then." "Business is business," William Harrison snapped. "We can't let sentiment interfere with progress." "Progress?" Jack's voice rose slightly. "You call pushing families off their land progress? You call destroying communities to save a few dollars on route planning progress?" Clara dismounted quietly and moved closer, Thomas following behind her. She wanted to hear the full conversation before deciding what to do. "You're being naive," William Harrison continued. "The railroad has brought civilization to this territory. We've created jobs, connected communities, made commerce possible. A few people had to be relocated, but that's the price of progress." "A few people?" Jack shook his head. "Father, we've displaced hundreds of families. We've destroyed farms that had been worked for generations. We've broken promises and ignored contracts when it suited our purposes." One of the lawyers stepped forward. "Mr. Harrison, if you don't return to Denver within the week, your father is prepared to name someone else as his heir. You'll lose everything." Jack was quiet for a moment, and Clara could see the struggle on his face. Finally, he spoke. "Let him," Jack said quietly. "I'd rather lose the money than lose my soul." William Harrison's face turned red with anger. "You ungrateful fool. Do you have any idea what you're throwing away?" "I know exactly what I'm throwing away," Jack replied. "The question is, do you know what you're asking me to become?" That's when Clara stepped forward. Her heart was pounding, but she knew she had to speak. "Excuse me," she said clearly. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think there might be another way." All the men turned to look at her in surprise. William Harrison's eyebrows rose at the sight of a young woman in simple ranch clothes daring to interrupt their business discussion. "Clara," Jack said, his voice filled with surprise and something else. Relief, maybe, or hope. "What are you doing here?" "I came because I care about you," Clara said simply. "And because I think I might have a solution to your problem." She reached into her bag and pulled out the deed to her father's land. The precious document she had protected from the bandits at such great cost. "This is the deed to 800 acres of prime ranch land," she said, addressing both Jack and his father. "It's worth a considerable amount of money. I'm willing to sell it to the Harrison Pacific Railroad at a fair price with one condition." William Harrison looked interested despite himself. "What condition?" Clara took a deep breath. "That Jack be put in charge of a new division of the railroad, one dedicated to fair dealing with landowners and proper compensation for families who need to relocate. Let him prove that you can build a railroad and still treat people with dignity." The silence that followed seemed to last forever. Clara could see Jack staring at her with amazement, while his father's calculating mind worked through the implications of her proposal. "You would give up your land for this?" William Harrison asked. "I'm not giving it up," Clara corrected. "I'm investing it in something better. Jack has shown me that wealth means nothing if you don't use it to help others. This would let him do that while still being part of his family." Jack stepped closer to Clara. "You don't have to do this," he said quietly. "That land is your future, your security." Clara looked into his eyes and saw everything she needed to know. "My future isn't about land or money, Jack. It's about being with someone who shares my values and dreams." William Harrison cleared his throat. "It's an interesting proposal," he admitted. "But one small parcel of land hardly proves anything." "Then make it a real test," Clara suggested. "Give Jack 1 year to show that his way can work. If he succeeds, expand the program. If he fails, you'll know you were right all along." After a long moment, William Harrison nodded slowly. "Very well, 1 year. But I want to see results, not just good intentions." Jack looked at his father, then at Clara, then back at his father. "And if it works? If we can prove that the railroad can be profitable and ethical at the same time, then you'll have earned your place in the business," William Harrison said. "On your own terms." As the lawyers and railroad men departed, Jack took Clara's hands in his. "Why did you do that?" he asked. "You risked everything for me," Clara smiled. "Because I realized that having money means nothing if you don't have someone to share your dreams with. And because I believe in the man you are, not the fortune you inherited." Jack pulled her close, mindful of her healing shoulder. "Then will you help me build something better? Will you marry me and help me prove that business can have a heart?" Clara looked around at the beautiful mountain valley that Jack called home, then up at the man who had saved her life in more ways than one. "I can't think of anything I'd rather do," she said. And as the stars came out over the peaceful ranch, Clara knew that sometimes the best legacies weren't built with money but with love, courage, and the determination to make the world a little bit better. Maya stared at David for a moment, wondering if she had heard him correctly. A stranger offering to drive her home should have set off every alarm bell her mother had ever installed in her head. But something about David felt different. Maybe it was the way he had laughed at her pancake story, or how he seemed just as surprised by his own offer as she was. "You don't have to do that," Maya said carefully. "I take the bus all the time. It's no big deal." "When's the last bus?" David asked, glancing at the dashboard clock that read 12:15 a.m. Maya winced. "About 10 minutes ago." "Then it's settled. I'm driving you home." David started the engine, and it purred to life with the quiet confidence of expensive machinery. "Besides, my assistant clearly isn't coming, and I could use the company for the drive." Maya gave him her address, expecting him to recognize the neighborhood and maybe change his mind. Riverside Heights wasn't dangerous exactly, but it wasn't the kind of place where people drove cars that cost more than most people's houses. David just nodded and pulled out of the parking garage without any sign of judgment. "So tell me about the pancake engineering," David said as they merged onto the quiet city streets. "Is that something they teach in waitressing school?" Maya laughed. "There's no waitressing school. You just learn as you go, mostly by May. King mistakes and having people yell at you about them. But Tony, my boss, he taught me that every customer has a story, even the difficult ones." "What kind of story does the syrup thrower have?" "Probably a bad one," Maya said, looking out at the city lights streaming past. People don't usually throw food at strangers when their lives are going well. Maybe he lost his job, or his wife left him, or his kids won't talk to him anymore. Hurt people, you know. David was quiet for a moment. That's a very generous way to look at it. My mom always says you never know what someone else is carrying. Could be grief, could be shame, could be fear. Makes it easier to be patient when someone's taking it out on you. They drove in comfortable silence for a while, the city gradually changing around them. The sleek office buildings gave way to older neighborhoods with corner stores and bus stops. David didn't seem uncomfortable with the transition, just curious about this part of the city he probably never visited. "What about you?" Maya asked. "What's your story?" David's hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. "That's complicated. Most good stories are." David glanced at her, seeming to weigh how much to share with this stranger who had accidentally entered his car and somehow made him feel more human than he had in months. "I used to think I was building something important," David said slowly. "My company creates software that helps businesses run more efficiently. When I started, I thought I was making the world better, helping small companies compete with the big ones. But now I spend most of my time in meetings about profit margins and market share. I haven't written a single line of code in 3 years. I barely remember why I wanted to do this in the first place," Maya nodded. "Sounds like you got so busy climbing the ladder, you forgot to check if it was leaning against the right wall." David looked at her with surprise. "That's exactly what it feels like. My dad used to say that. He was a carpenter before he got sick. Always talked about making sure your ladder was on solid ground before you started climbing. Sounds like a smart man." "He was. He died when I was 19. Cancer." Maya's voice stayed steady, but David could hear the old pain underneath. "Mom's been sick too, on and off. That's why I work so much. Medical bills don't pay themselves." "I'm sorry," David said, and he meant it. When was the last time he had talked to someone dealing with real problems? His world was full of people complaining about stock options and vacation home repairs. Maya's phone rang, cutting through their conversation. She glanced at the screen and her face went pale. "Mom," Maya answered quickly. "What's wrong?" David could only hear one side of the conversation, but Maya's increasingly worried responses told him everything he needed to know. "When did it start?" Maya asked. "Did you call Dr. Peterson?" No, don't wait. Call an ambulance right now. I don't care about the cost." Maya was quiet for a long moment, listening. David watched her struggle to stay calm, her free hand clenched in her lap. "Okay, I'm coming right now. Tell Luis to stay calm and help you pack a bag. Yes, I know it's expensive. We'll figure it out later." Maya hung up and immediately started dialing another number. "Everything okay?" David asked, though he could see it wasn't. "My mom's having chest pains. Bad ones. My brother called an ambulance." Maya held the phone to her ear, waiting. "Come on, Rosa, pick up." The call went to voicemail. Maya tried 2 more numbers with the same result. "The hospital is across town," Maya said, more to herself than to David. "If I leave right now and take 3 buses, I can be there in maybe 2 hours. Maybe less if the connections work out." David didn't hesitate. "I'll take you." "What?" "To the hospital. I'll drive you there right now." Maya shook her head quickly. "No, you don't understand. It's really far and you don't even know me. I can't ask you to do that." "You're not asking. I'm offering." David was already changing direction, heading toward the hospital instead of Maya's neighborhood. "What's your mom's name? I'll call ahead and see if they can tell us anything." "You can't just—" "This isn't your problem," Maya protested, even as relief flooded through her. "Maybe not," David said, "but right now it's what I can do to help." Maya stared at him, this stranger who was completely upending her expectations of how people behaved. In her world, you learned not to expect help from anyone, especially not from people who clearly had money and options. "Her name is Carmen Rodriguez," Maya said quietly. "And thank you." "I know this is crazy. We all need help sometimes," David said, pressing a little harder on the accelerator, "even when we're too proud to ask for it." The drive to Metropolitan General Hospital normally took 45 minutes. David made it in 28, navigating traffic and side streets with the confidence of someone who had spent years in the city. He didn't talk much during the drive, seeming to understand that Maya needed to focus on staying calm. Maya spent the time on her phone, calling her brother Luis to get updates and trying to reach anyone who might be able to cover her shifts for the next few days. David listened to her make arrangements with the quiet efficiency of someone who had learned to handle crises alone. "She's stable," Maya said after talking to Luis. They're running tests, but she's awake and talking. The doctors think it might be a panic attack, but they want to keep her overnight for observation. That's good news, David said, pulling into the hospital parking garage. Yeah, except overnight observation costs about $1,000 that we don't have. Maya rubbed her temples. But she's okay, and that's what matters. Everything else we can figure out later. David parked the car and turned off the engine. Maya reached for the door handle, then paused. I don't know how to thank you for this, she said. You completely saved me tonight. Don't worry about it, David said. Go take care of your mom. Maya hesitated. Are you coming in? David hadn't planned to, but something about the way she asked made him reconsider. Do you want me to? I don't want to keep bothering you, but... Maya's voice was small. I hate hospitals. They make me think about when my dad was sick. Then I'm coming with you, David said simply. As they walked through the automatic doors into the bright fluorescent world of the emergency room, David realized he hadn't thought about quarterly reports or board meetings or profit margins in over an hour. For the first time in years, he was exactly where he needed to be. David stayed at the hospital until almost 4 a.m. He watched Maya navigate insurance paperwork with the same patience she probably used with difficult customers at the diner. She spoke kindly to the overworked nurses, shared snacks from the vending machine with other worried families, and somehow managed to keep her teenage brother Luis calm while their mother underwent tests. When Carmen was finally settled in a room for observation, Maya insisted that David go home. He had work in the morning, she said, and he had already done more than enough. David wanted to argue, but he could see the exhaustion in Maya's eyes. She needed rest, not more conversation with a stranger. Take my number, David said, handing her his business card, in case you need anything. Maya looked at the card and her eyes widened slightly. David Chen, CEO, TechFlow Solutions. She looked up at him. You're the CEO? You know the company? My friend Rose's boyfriend works there. In the warehouse. He says the benefits aren't great, but the pay is decent. Maya studied the card again. I thought you said you did software development. I do. I used to. Now I mostly sit in meetings. David felt oddly embarrassed about his title. Same difference, really. Maya handed the card back. I can't take this. Why not? Because you're a CEO, and I'm a waitress who got into your car by mistake. This isn't how the world works. David pushed the card gently back toward her. Maybe that's exactly why it should work this way. 3 days later, David found himself standing outside Tony's diner at 2 p.m., telling himself he was just in the neighborhood. His assistant Jessica had looked at him strangely when he asked her to reschedule his lunch meeting, but she didn't ask questions. The diner was busy with the afternoon crowd. David took a seat at the counter and watched Maya work. She moved between tables with easy efficiency, remembering orders without writing them down, checking on elderly customers who ate alone, and somehow making everyone feel like they were the only person in the room. You're the guy who helped Maya the other night, said a voice behind him. David turned to see Tony wiping his hands on his apron. She told me what you did. That was good of you. How's her mother? David asked. Better. Turned out to be stress more than anything serious. But the hospital bill is going to hurt. Tony shook his head. Maya works harder than anyone I know, but it's never quite enough, you know? David did know. He was starting to understand a lot of things he had ignored for years. Maya appeared at his elbow, coffee pot in hand. David, what are you doing here? I was in the neighborhood, David said, which was technically true if you counted a 20-minute detour as being in the neighborhood. Thought I'd try the famous fluffy pancakes. Maya smiled. The first real smile he had seen from her since the hospital, coming right up. As she walked away, David noticed other things about the diner. The older man in the corner booth who ordered the same thing every day and always left exact change. The young mother trying to keep her toddler entertained while she ate a sandwich that was probably her only meal of the day. Tea. Construction workers who joked loudly but always tipped well. These were Maya's people. This was her world. And somehow in this simple place with its cracked vinyl booths and cheerful chaos, David felt more grounded than he had in his glass-walled office in months. So what's the verdict? Maya asked when she brought his pancakes. David took a bite. They were perfectly fluffy. I can see why someone would get upset if these weren't right. These are serious pancakes. Tony taught me that everything we do matters to someone. Even pancakes. Maya refilled his coffee. How someone feels about their meal might be the only good thing that happens to them that day. David thought about that as he ate. When was the last time he had considered how his decisions affected individual people? His company employed over 2,000 people, but they had become numbers on spreadsheets, not individuals with families and struggles and dreams. Over the next 2 weeks, David returned to the diner 4 more times. He told himself it was just convenient, a quick meal between meetings. But the truth was more complicated. In Maya's world, people mattered in ways that his corporate environment had trained him to ignore. "You know you don't have to keep coming here," Maya said during his 5th visit. "I mean, I'm glad you do, but you don't owe me anything for the hospital thing." "I know," David said. "I like it here." "Why?" David looked around the diner, trying to put his feelings into words. "Because it's real. Everyone here is exactly who they appear to be. No one's trying to impress anyone or get something from someone else. That's because we're all too tired to pretend," Maya said with a laugh. "When you work 3 jobs, you don't have energy left for putting on a show." 3 jobs. Diner, grocery store, and I clean offices on weekends when I can get the shifts. Saving up for nursing school. Maya wiped down the counter as she talked. "Always wanted to be a nurse, but life had other plans." David was quiet for a moment. "What stopped you?" "Dad got sick right after I graduated high school. Someone had to work, someone had to take care of him, someone had to keep Luis in school." Maya shrugged. "Sometimes you do what needs doing, not what you want to do. That must have been hard. It was what it was. You adapt." Maya looked at him curiously. "What about you? You always want to be a CEO?" David almost laughed. "No, I wanted to be a programmer. I loved solving problems, building things that worked. I started TechFlow because I thought I could create software that actually helped small businesses instead of just making rich people richer." "What changed?" "Success, I guess. The company grew, investors came in. Suddenly I was spending all my time in meetings about growth strategies and market penetration. The actual programming got handed off to other people. So why don't you go back to programming?" The question was so simple, so obvious that David was momentarily speechless. "Because I'm the CEO, I have responsibilities." "To who?" "To the shareholders, the board, the investors." Maya nodded slowly. "What about to yourself?" That question stayed with David long after he left the diner. What about to himself? When had he stopped asking what he wanted and started only asking what was expected of him? That night, David did something he hadn't done in 3 years. He opened his laptop and started writing code. Nothing important, just a simple program to organize his personal files. But as his fingers moved across the keyboard, something inside him woke up. The joy of creation, the satisfaction of solving problems, the pure pleasure of building something useful from nothing. He worked until sunrise, forgetting about the board meeting scheduled for 9 a.m., forgetting about the quarterly reports waiting on his desk. For the first time in years, David remembered who he used to be. The next day, David made a decision that would surprise everyone, including himself. He called a meeting with his head of human resources and asked a simple question: "How are our employees actually doing?" The answer was not what he wanted to hear. Good people working multiple jobs to make ends meet. Talented programmers leaving for better benefits at other companies. Warehouse workers like Rose's boyfriend choosing between paying rent and buying groceries. Maya hadn't set out to change David's mind about anything. She had simply shown him, through her own life and the lives of people around her, what his decisions looked like from the ground level, and David was beginning to realize that all his success meant nothing if it was built on other people's struggles. David was reviewing quarterly reports when his phone buzzed with a text from Maya. It was the first time she had ever contacted him outside of their diner conversations. "Hey David, sorry to bother you. Could you recommend a good lawyer? Need to ask about payment plans for medical bills." David stared at the message for a long moment.
Maya never asked for help, not even when she clearly needed it.
Something serious must have happened. He called her immediately. "Maya, what's going on?" "Oh, hi. I didn't expect you to call. It's not a big deal, really. Mom needs surgery and the insurance company is being difficult about covering it. We just need to understand our options." David could hear the carefully controlled stress in her voice. "What kind of surgery?" "Heart procedure. Nothing life-threatening, but it needs to happen soon. The doctor says waiting could make things worse." Maya paused. "The insurance says it's elective because it's not an immediate emergency. Apparently preventing a heart attack doesn't count as necessary. How much are we talking about? $78,000. Give or take. Maya laughed, but there was no humor in it. I've been doing math all morning, trying to figure out how to make this work. Even if I pick up extra shifts everywhere, even if Luis gets a part-time job after school, we're looking at maybe 15 years to pay this off. If nothing else goes wrong. David felt something twist in his stomach. $78,000. He spent more than that on business dinners in a year. For Maya's family, it might as well have been $78 million. Maya, let me help. I can cover this. No. Her response was immediate and firm. Thank you, but no. We're not a charity case. This isn't charity. This is friends helping friends. David, you're a nice person, but we barely know each other. You don't owe us anything, and I won't take money from you. We'll figure something else out. David wanted to argue, but he could hear in Maya's voice that pushing would only make her angry. This was her pride talking, the same independence that made her work 3 jobs instead of asking for help. After he hung up, David couldn't concentrate on his reports. He kept thinking about Maya's situation, but also about something else. How many of his own employees were facing similar choices? How many good people were struggling with medical bills while he worried about profit margins? That afternoon, David called his head of human resources, Janet, into his office. I want a complete review of our employee benefits package, he said, without preamble. Janet looked confused. We just reviewed it 6 months ago. Everything's competitive with industry standards. I don't care about industry standards. I care about whether our people can afford to get sick without going bankrupt. David, are you feeling all right? This is pretty far from our usual priorities. David realized that Janet was right. In 3 years as CEO, he had never once asked about employee healthcare costs. He had approved benefits packages based on cost to the company, not value to employees. I want to know how many of our people have medical debt. I want to know how many are working second jobs to afford basic health care. I want real numbers, not statistics. Janet shifted uncomfortably. That's pretty personal information. Then do an anonymous survey. Make it voluntary. But I want to understand what our employees are actually dealing with. Over the next week, David dove into research that should have horrified him years earlier. He learned that 37% of his employees had medical debt. 15% worked second jobs just to afford their insurance premiums. The warehouse workers had the worst benefits because they were classified as contractors, which saved the company money but left them without proper health care coverage. People like Rosa's boyfriend, who Maya had mentioned, were choosing between rent and doctor visits. David started having conversations with employees at different levels of the company. Not formal interviews, just casual talks in the break room or elevator. What he heard made him realize how disconnected he had become from the people who actually made his company successful. Jennifer from accounting was rationing her diabetes medication to make it last longer. Mike from the warehouse had been putting off dental work for 2 years because he couldn't afford the co-pays. Lisa from customer service was considering quitting to find a job with better benefits, even though she loved working at TechFlow. These weren't numbers on a spreadsheet. These were real people with real problems that his decisions directly affected. Meanwhile, Maya had stopped coming to work at the diner during lunch hours. David learned from Tony that she had picked up extra shifts at the grocery store, trying to save money for her mother's surgery. She was working 18-hour days, sleeping 4 hours a night, and living on coffee and determination. David wanted to help, but every time he tried to bring up the subject, Maya changed the topic. She had made her position clear, and her pride wasn't something he could simply override with good intentions. The breakthrough came during a board meeting 3 weeks later. David was presenting the quarterly earnings report when one of the board members, an older man named Robert, made a comment that changed everything. Excellent work on keeping labor costs down, David. The savings from the contractor reclassification really paid off. Contractor reclassification? David asked. The warehouse staff, moving them from employees to contractors, saved us about $2 million annually in benefits costs. Smart business move. David felt something cold settle in his stomach. When did we make that change? About 18 months ago. It was in the cost reduction plan we approved. You signed off on it. David remembered the meeting vaguely. A PowerPoint presentation full of efficiency metrics and cost savings. He had approved it without thinking about what it actually meant for the people involved. People like Rosa's boyfriend. People who had lost their health care coverage so David's company could report better profit margins to shareholders. How many employees were affected? David asked quietly. About 300 warehouse and maintenance staff, Robert replied cheerfully. The productivity metrics haven't suffered at all. After the meeting, David sat alone in his office, staring out at the city skyline. 300 people had lost their benefits because of a decision he had made without thinking. 300 families dealing with situations like Maya's while he celebrated record profits. He thought about Maya working 18-hour days to save for her mother's surgery. He thought about Jennifer rationing her medication. He thought about all the people he had never considered when he signed that cost reduction plan. That night, David made a decision that would shock his board of directors and probably cost him his job. But for the first time in years, he felt like he was making a choice based on the person he wanted to be, not the person others expected him to be. He called an emergency board meeting for the next morning. I want to propose some changes to our employee benefits structure, David announced to the surprised board members. What kind of changes? Robert asked suspiciously. David took a deep breath. I want to reclassify all contractors back to full employee status. I want to implement full healthcare coverage with no employee premiums. I want to add mental health benefits, dental coverage, and an education assistance program. The room was silent for a long moment. David, Robert said slowly, that would cost us approximately $8 million annually. Our shareholders expect consistent profit growth. Then maybe it's time we started managing for stakeholders instead of just shareholders, David replied. He knew he was risking everything. But he also knew that Maya was right about one thing. Sometimes you do what needs doing, not what you want to do, and what needed doing was taking care of the people who had made his success possible. The board meeting didn't go well. You want to spend $8 million on benefits upgrades? Robert's voice could have cut glass. David, I think you need to take a step back and remember who you work for. I work for this company, David replied calmly. And this company is only as strong as the people who make it run. Another board member, Patricia, leaned forward. The shareholders won't accept this kind of reduction in profits. We have obligations. We have obligations to our employees too. The debate lasted 3 hours. In the end, David got his way, but barely. The vote was 4-3, and he could see the doubt in every face around the table. Robert made it clear that if this initiative hurt their quarterly numbers, David's job would be on the line. David didn't care. For the first time in years, he was making decisions based on what felt right instead of what looked good on paper. The announcement to employees came the following Monday. David stood in the main warehouse looking at the faces of people who had been working without proper benefits for 18 months because of his signature on a cost-cutting measure. Effective immediately, all contract workers are being reclassified as full employees with complete benefits packages, David announced. Healthcare premiums will be covered entirely by the company. We're adding dental, vision, and mental health coverage, and we're launching an education assistance program for anyone who wants to go back to school. The silence was deafening. Then someone in the back started clapping, and within seconds the entire warehouse was applauding. David saw grown men with tears in their eyes, women hugging each other, people pulling out their phones to call their families with the news. Rosa's boyfriend, whose name turned out to be Carlos, approached David after the announcement. Sir, I just want to say thank you. My daughter has been needing glasses for 2 years, but we couldn't afford them. This changes everything for my family. David shook Carlos's hand, thinking about how many other families had been affected by decisions he had made without considering real consequences. The business media reaction was swift and brutal. TechFlow CEO makes costly mistake, read one headline. Shareholder value sacrificed for feel-good politics, declared another. But something interesting happened over the next few months. Employee satisfaction surveys showed the highest scores in company history. Productivity increased. Turnover dropped dramatically. People who felt valued and secure worked harder and smarter. More importantly, talented programmers who had been considering leaving decided to stay. New employees started choosing TechFlow over competitors specifically because of the benefits package. The company that David thought would suffer actually started, attracting better people. Maya didn't find out about David's changes until she ran into Carlos at the grocery store where she worked her second job. Maya, have you heard what happened at TechFlow? Carlos was practically glowing with excitement. They gave us all full benefits. Real healthcare, not the terrible plan we had before. Rosa can finally go to the doctor for her back problems. Maya felt a strange mix of pride and suspicion. That's wonderful, Carlos. When did this happen? Last month. The CEO announced it himself. Nice guy, actually. Really seemed to care about what we had to say. That evening, Maya confronted David when he showed up at the diner for what had become his regular Tuesday dinner. So Carlos tells me you've become some kind of workplace hero, Maya said, refilling his coffee with perhaps a little more force than necessary. David looked up from his menu, trying to read her expression. News travels fast. Did you do this because of what I told you about my mom? I did this because it was the right thing to do. Maya sat down across from him, something she had never done during his visits. David, I told you I didn't want charity. This isn't charity, Maya. This is me finally doing my job the way it should have been done from the beginning. David met her eyes. You didn't ask me to change anything. You just showed me what the real world looks like from where you're standing. But the timing was coincidence. Well, mostly. David smiled slightly. Okay. Maybe seeing what you're going through made me realize how many other people were in similar situations. But the changes weren't about you specifically. They were about me becoming the kind of person I should have been all along. Maya was quiet for a moment. How much trouble are you in with your board? Quite a bit. But the numbers are starting to look good. Turns out when you treat people well, they work better. Who would have thought? My dad would have liked you, Maya said suddenly. He always said the best bosses were the ones who remembered what it was like to work with their hands. 6 months later, Maya made an announcement of her own at the diner. I'm going back to school, she told Tony during the morning rush. Nursing program at the community college. I start in the fall, Tony beamed with pride. That's wonderful, sweetheart. But how are you managing the cost? TechFlow has this education assistance program. Turns out it's not just for their employees, but for family members of employees too. And since Rosa works there now as a full-time customer service rep instead of a contractor, I qualify. David happened to be sitting at the counter when Maya made her announcement. He hadn't known she was planning to apply for the education program, but seeing her excitement made every difficult board meeting worth it. When do you start? David asked. September. I'll keep working here part-time, but I can finally do what I've always wanted to do. Maya's smile was brighter than David had ever seen it. Help people get better instead of just serving them coffee. You've been helping people get better all along, David said. Just in a different way. A year later, David stood in front of another board meeting, but this time the mood was very different. TechFlow had just posted record profits, despite the increased investment in employee benefits. I have to admit I was wrong about the benefits expansion, Robert said, looking at the quarterly report. Employee retention is up 40%, productivity is up 25%, and we're attracting top talent from our competitors. Whatever you did, it worked, David smiled. Thinking about Maya, who was halfway through her nursing program while maintaining a 4.0 GPA. Thinking about Carlos, whose daughter now had glasses and was excelling in school. Thinking about Jennifer, who no longer had to ration her medication. We didn't do anything revolutionary, David told the board. We just remembered that our employees are people, not line items on a budget. After the meeting, David drove to the diner for lunch. Maya was there, studying between tables, her nursing textbooks spread across the counter. She looked up when he walked in. How's the future nurse doing? David asked. Tired but happy, Maya replied. Clinical rotations start next month. I'll finally get to work in a real hospital. Your mom must be proud. She is. Her surgery went well, by the way. The new insurance plan covered everything. Maya paused. I never properly thanked you for that. You don't need to thank me. You taught me something important. What's that? David thought for a moment. That the best way to measure success isn't by how high you climb, but by how many people you bring with you. Maya smiled and poured him a cup of coffee. That sounds like something my dad would have said. Sounds like he was a smart man. He was. And I think he would have been proud of both of us. As David watched Maya return to her studies, he realized that getting into the wrong car that night had led him to exactly the right place. Not to romance or fairy tale endings, but to something better. The chance to become the person he was meant to be all along. Sometimes the most important journeys begin with the smallest mistakes. And sometimes those mistakes turn out to be the best thing that ever happened to everyone involved.